The Evermore podcast is now sponsored by WFST Total Compliance. WFST provides fire safety requirements UK-wide to prepare you and your employees should the worst happen. Do what you do best and visit wfst.co.uk today. Enjoy the episode.
Let's go!
Good evening and welcome back to the Evermore YouTube channel. Yeah, we're back with the Evermore podcast special. It's Chris and Mark with you. We're very excited to get this one sorted. There's been so many horrendous refereeing decisions. We thought we would get a very special guest on, Mark, in a minute to talk about what's going on with the men in black. Just before we introduce him, a little reminder, everybody, if you're just checking us out for the first time, please consider subscribing. We'd love you to come and join us. We're on 2,800 subscribers now. Loads of room for you guys. 2 weekly shows, Mondays and normally Wednesdays, but it's Thursday this week, as you can tell, and pop-up videos like reviews and transfer stories and everything else as well. And we're live tonight, so make sure you jump in the comments. If you do have a question for our very special guest that we're going to bring in a minute, feel free to smash it in there, and we'll do our best to put it to him, as long as we haven't asked him already, Mark.
Well, yes, we had a long list of refereeing decisions and VAR decisions that we could have spent about 16 hours doing this. So we're trying to limit it to an hour, I think.
Absolutely. We'll do our best to keep it to our normal schedule. But just before we introduce him, we'll try and give him as good of an intro as we possibly can. So he's a former head of the PG MOL, who've been under some serious criticism this week. He's refereed all through the levels of English football. He's a former FIFA listed referee. And, he was the man who tried his very best to get things right. And then, he's not too happy about the way things are being run at the minute. He's been very outspoken on Twitter, which is why we love to have him on the channel. So without further ado, Mark, if you can just bring in our very special guest, it is Keith Hackett himself. Hi, Keith. Welcome to Evermore Podcast.
Hi, delighted to be on.
Fantastic, mate. Great to have you on. We've got loads to get stuck into, and as I say, if anyone fires some questions over, Keith, and we'll get some time, we'll try to put them to you. But as we're a Newcastle podcast, we're going to talk about kind of everything really. But as we're a Newcastle podcast, we thought it would be remiss if we didn't get your take on the weekend and the Newcastle game in particular. So obviously we had a great result against Brentford, but much like a lot of other games in the Premier League calendar that weekend, it was marred with some controversy. So the two big ones really, Keith, to get your take on. Firstly is the Alexander Isak penalty, and then also the Callum Wilson handball, which maybe wasn't as controversial. But what was your take on those two major decisions in that game, and how did you feel the officials handled them?
Poorly, and not worthy of a Premier League referee. We've got the referee, and we've got a professional referee. We've got VAR, another professional referee. We've got a budget of £23 million being spent on referees at the professional level, Championship and Premier League. And we're forgetting the basics of refereeing. And that is, if you're going to award a penalty kick, you've got to be 100% right. That's not a penalty. I mean, that's a guess. And, I watched Alan Shearer, and I think I was more upset than he was. I mean, because you look at it and you think the referee's in a good position. The game, it is a contact sport. And therefore, we look at it and we go, how can you make a penalty kick out of that? It's not an offence. It's not a foul. So for me, that was awful. When it comes to handball, well, we might as well throw a dozen balls in the air, aren't we? Because it's such a stupid law. I mean, I often speak to my mate Mark Elsie and other referees, and in a room, we'd come out of a room all arguing. I mean, normally Mark and I agree invariably, but the handball law, which David Ellery played about with, has complicated it. I mean, who in the middle of a match with 70, 80,000 spectators is going to judge whether the ball is above the underside of the armpit? It's nothing to do with a shirt sleeve. But what he could have done is he could have said, right, it is shirt sleeve. And this, Mr. Manufacturer and Premier League and everybody else, these are the lengths of the shirt sleeves that you're going to produce. But they don't. So handball, second guess it. If you want to give it, give it. I mean, we had one that brushed the body this week, and they made that up. They manufactured it into a handball and said it hit the hand. Well, please show me a video clip that shows that. So, you know, when I criticise match officials, people get upset. Colleagues of mine get upset because they say, Keith, you're one of us. And I go, absolutely, I'm one of you. And I know that when I made an error, I didn't make as many errors as what's happening now. And in the meantime, you know, I've left work at 4 o'clock and I've driven up to St. James's Park, rushed out my car, into the dressing room, got changed and said, right, we're on the pitch, and refereed. And then got home at 1 a.m. You know, the whole aspect of professional refereeing is they've got as much time on their hands to improve their knowledge of the laws, where they need to be on the field of play. So that is fitness. Because when I introduced the PGMOL with Philip Dunn, I was the development manager. I brought in a sports scientist, a very good one. And we increased the speed profiles of referees through a running coach. So we had distances and speed profiles and measured every decision. And when we got them wrong, which we did, you know, you'd have somebody like Graham Poll, who never made a mistake in a million years, but he would be in the room, right? And I would say to him, explain to me how you came to that decision. And then we'd have a debate, all aimed at whatever the outcome was, that everybody else knew what he'd made. And if he'd made a mistake, they wouldn't going to make the same mistake. So, hey, VAR is a mess. I can give you some solutions. I think the first solution is, I don't think you can be a referee on a Friday night and a VAR at 12:30 at lunchtime on a Saturday. It's just not feasible. It's not workable. Yeah. And in the same way, are you going to ask a Premier League player to play a game on a Saturday and play a game on a Sunday or Monday? No. So for me, just treat referees as professional athletes and then do what I did with the assistant referees. You know, there's a career choice that they make at the senior level. And that is, I'm going to be an assistant referee for the rest of my career, or I'm going to be a referee. Now, when you make that choice to become an assistant referee, you do special training, you get better at it. And this is what they've got to do with VAR. They've got to have a panel, like at the World Cup, a panel of VAR specialists. That's all they do. They train, they analyze videos, they get to use the system well. That's the first thing. The second thing is I bring in the semi-automated offside system. I don't want anybody playing around with lines and rules and all those sort of things on the screen. Just bring that in. And then there's 4 things. The third one, 30 seconds. You got 30 seconds VAR to tell me that's a goal, or it's no goal, or it's offside, not offside, or it's a foul and a penalty kick, or it's not a penalty kick.
Yeah. Or you stick to your decision. You stick to the initial decision and you move on. Yeah.
If he can't make his mind up in 30 seconds, it's the referee's on-field call. It's his. Yeah. He's made it.
Is that clear and obvious too vague then? Is that the point? If you can't make it within that time frame, that it's not clear and obvious?
Right.
That?
As a Newcastle fan, everything that goes against you is clear and obvious. Right?
True. True, yeah.
If it's the opposition, it's less clear and obvious. We're human beings. Yeah. And therefore, the whole aspect is it's a wavy line. And the criteria is a sponge. What, you know, when I went to the Premier League and said, look, we want goal line technology, they looked at me as though I'd come off a planet. And I can remember Richard Scudamore saying, I don't think you're going to get that. I don't think it's feasible. But in fairness, I then went to Hawkeye, worked with Hawkeye for about 18 months. We used Fulham Football Ground, the academy at Motspur Park, and we set the system up. And And all I said in the criteria to the Orkai was, all I want you to tell me or tell the referee is the ball's over the line. I don't want anything else. That's the criteria. And I want it within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And, so that's the third bit. The fourth bit is I want to hear what's going on, like you do.
Yeah. I know Mark's very, very on board with that as well.
What is the referee saying to the VAR?
Yeah.
Because on occasions, I've got to tell you, I'll be telling him to go on one. And I think referees have got to develop a pair.
Yes.
I could imagine sitting in a VAR room, in a VAR room, saying to Jeff Winter, you got that wrong, buddy lad, it's a penalty kick. And I know what he'd say. If he thought it wasn't, I know exactly what his answer
I remember
would be.
Jeff. I'm sure I know what he would have said.
But that's how you want to develop the personalities of referees.
Yes.
You want them to have the bottle and the strength and the courage to actually go with their decisions. What we've got now, we've got a parrot on the shoulder. We've actually given baggage. And we've got, I think it's 2-3 years ago, I had a conversation with Nigel Owens, the rugby union referee, because I've got to tell you, I've always wanted that process that rugby has in football. That was always the aim. I was hoping that that's how it would evolve. Nigel Owens said to me, what it will do, Keith, your VAR, and it'd only been in a year, is it'll create lazy referees. And then he used an analogy and said, right, think of a tightrope walker. He's got no safety net. He's got a pole and he walks out. Every step he makes, he's absolutely going to be 100% because his own life is at risk. Give him a safety net, he'll get lazy and he'll fall off because he's got a safety net to catch him. And I've seen referees and good referees, capable referees in good positions like we saw in the Spurs-Brighton game this weekend, two absolutely easy, nailed-on penalty kicks seen by the referee who doesn't give them. Now, I'll tell you, as a referee, even if I had VAR operating, I would not expect the VAR to come in on those because I'm there, I've seen it, and I know it's a foul, and I know it's a holding offence for the other one. They are nailed on penalty kicks not given. And I'll tell you what I used to do. I didn't have that type of error, but I had errors. I pick the phone up and say to the referee, go and have a rest because I'm not using you next week. I'll get your coach to have a chat with you. And the bonus that you are likely to earn at the end of the season's had a bit of a knock, mate. Because I think I operated as though I was the 21st manager of the Premier League. And the 21st manager, if Eddie Howe thinks a player's not doing what he expects him to do, and that's to deliver a performance, he's out of the team. He 100%. Might be on the bench, but he's out of the team. No different. And refereeing should be treated in no different way because they are paid professionals.
Yeah.
We were amateurs and we took it upon ourselves as amateur referees to train without supervision, pass fitness tests without supervision, to analyse our performances. We had a match assessor in the stand keeping us in check. We don't have an assessor in the stand anymore because Riley got rid of him. So there's no check and balance. There's no former referee like George Courtney coming in and saying, hey, my son, talk me through that penalty kick. And then saying, well, I think you need to have a look at the video because you got it wrong. It's straight talking. I'm not, what really concerns me is that over recent weeks and months, I've seen this growing trend of people, fans, questioning the integrity of our referees. And we shouldn't do that. They're not corrupt. They're incompetent, and they're incompetent because they're not. Hey, you're in sales, and you don't get your budgets. There's a guy called your boss who's ringing you up and saying you need to get out of your house a bit earlier, son. And I'm writing to you to tell you you're getting a warning letter, and you're one step nearer the door.
That's how the real world works, isn't it, Keith? Do you think they're a bit too protected by a bubble? Maybe is Riley just protecting them possibly from things like that?
Well, I think that I've seen some referees who I believe have great personalities. I've seen good referees promoted onto the list, and then I've seen them decline because I'm thinking, where's this? I mean, when you get into the technicalities of where they run, why is he running around the field of play? Because the process of a referee is to see, to recognize that something's happened, to think about it, and then make a decision. That's the process. If you're not moving around the field of play, getting the right viewing angles, working your backside off, putting in the effort, you're not going to see those decisions, and you're going to get them wrong. And we're lazy up here in making those calls, like Atwell did at the weekend. We're lazy because the VAR sits there and probably thinks like me, that's a penalty kick, but it's not clear and obvious when it is. And then the outcome is that Atwell gets appointed to a game as VAR, which says to me they don't think much about that VAR role. And the VAR is informed he's not getting a game. But actually, he refereed Burnley on Monday, the day after. I mean, hey.
Yeah.
Why do I get frustrated? I can tell you that we had about 10 or 12 world-class referees that could go anywhere in the world and referee a football match and be regarded highly. We're probably down to about 2 or 3. That's the sadness. You won't get Michael Oliver in the same way that you didn't get Mark Clattenburg. You might have had George Courtney because he was spending more. But the Northeast has produced some fabulous referees, honestly, and you don't see them. We do. I've worked with them.
Yeah.
And when I look, I mean, all I do is I look at a football match now, and perhaps unfairly, but I measure them against the likes of George Courtney, Pat Partridge, Peter Willis. These are referees that went out week in, week out and delivered. And George Courtney, it was as fit as any of the referees that's on the list now. So I've gone on a bit. You can see that I'm passionate, and VAR is not working.
And I've got a couple of questions to kind of follow up a couple of things that you've sort of said. One is on VAR. Is there we've seen particularly when referees are called to the monitor, they will change the decision 99.9% of the time. The only one that I've seen that hasn't was Michael Oliver, who stuck with his original decision. Yeah. Is there a fear, do you think, from referees of overruling VAR at that point, or vice versa? Is there a fear from the VAR of saying to the referee, particularly if there's a difference in sort of experience, where you've got the newer referees and somebody like Oliver who's maybe is refereeing or on VAR, of sort of them disagreeing in that regard? Is there a fear of calling them to the monitor or overruling it?
Well, I think yes. I mean, if you're Michael Oliver, and look, Michael Oliver is world class. Make no mistake, he can referee anywhere. He's already done one World Cup and he'll do another. I mean, this is a top class of match official who's mature, who doesn't get many things wrong. So if you're the new kid on the block and you've just been promoted to the Premier League and you're his fourth official, you're a bit reluctant to knock on the door and say, Michael, I think you need to go to the monitor. Look, the honesty about this is go and have another look and you make the decision. I'm the VAR. I'm telling you, it don't look right. Go and have a look at it. And if you get to that screen, I'd be saying as Howard Webb, look, justify the decision if whichever way it is. Make the decision. And if you're happy that the decision you made is the right one, stick with it. And therefore, I think that's what we've got to encourage them to do. You and I can watch a match in a stadium and we don't see it. We come home and we watch the replay and we go, crikey, I didn't realise how good that pass was. You know, if you're in St James's Park and you saw that left footer that Amaron curls into the right-hand corner of the box, which he's done a few times, you see it, but you don't see it as well as you see it on television because you go, bloody hell. The skill in that is marvellous. Now, that's a little bit like refereeing, and that's why I support VAR, but they've got to get it right. They really have got to get it right. And the relationship is a problem. The point that you make is that the VAR guy, and this is why the VAR guy, all he should be is a VAR guy or girl. That's all he should do. He's not a referee. He's not competing with Michael Oliver. You know, for the appointments. There's only 10 games every weekend. There's 20 referees. Shouldn't compete. It should be like, it's VAR. Does he need to know who he is? I'm telling you, you need to go and look at the screen. That's all the VAR should do. And he goes and look at the screen. And he might say, what am I looking at? I can't see it. I'm off. Bye. And stick with it.
Yeah.
30 seconds is VAR actually saying, I need you to go to the screen. Because the one thing that you and I dislike is, and I've been in the stadiums and I watch a goal scored and it's a great goal, and you've got a muted, like, we're waiting and seeing that is VAR going to come in. And, you know, that's what we pay our money for, to watch football. I'm a fan. Yeah. You know, I don't want, you know, I mean, you know, our team's in the Sheffield Wednesday's in the First Division. We're not even in the Championship. But
you put us out the cup, Keith. Don't worry about that.
I know. But it was a great night for us. I was there. But the reality is, we didn't. You know, we don't have that with VAR.
Yeah.
And I get asked the question. I would suggest that the Premier League, the PGMOL, referees, they all get together and decide, is it working? And it's not. And why isn't it working? And if they can't see that it's, you know, if Howard can't see why it's not working, then he will get it right. Because he got it right in America.
Yeah, that and I kind of going into foreign leagues and stuff. I think that's one of the other points is we don't see as many contentious issues from VAR. Sometimes it does take a little bit long. I watched a Sassuolo game where they took about 4.5 minutes to decide on a penalty that was nowhere near a penalty and then gave it. So it does happen, but it doesn't seem to happen as much.
No.
Should there be movement, do you think, or would it be wise to start having movement, or can there be movement in terms of referees across the continent?
Well, I looked at that at one stage, even though I had people like Paul Clattenburg, Halsey, Dean, others, you know, in the squad, all regarded very highly, both here and overseas. But I could see that there was a problem on the horizon. And I had a conversation with Kalina, and I thought, could we convince him to come across? I honestly believe that when you look at, and lots of referees will hate me for saying this, but when I look at in 1981, I refereed the FA Cup final, and in it were two overseas players, Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa. There weren't any others in the country. And we were all English referees. I look around every team now, and the majority of players are overseas players. Yeah. And why are they overseas players? Because they're better than the English lot in the main.
Yeah.
Or they should be, and they're paying a lot of money. So my view is, if you want the best, and the Premier League is the best, you get the best. And so if I see a guy who refereed last night and sailed through the match without a problem, I'm thinking, I'll bring him in. So I would consider that.
Yeah.
The argument against that is that they say, well, that might affect referee recruitment and retention, but that's another problem,
Yeah. Absolutely.
But why should we put up with second best in certain areas?
Absolutely.
It's a great shout, Keith.
If you look at Chris Kavanagh, right? If you look at the top referee, Michael Oliver, and they've had 22, 23 games. Kavanagh's had 9. He might have had some Football League games, but he's had 9. Now, do you know when a player's coming back from injury, it usually takes a couple of games to get back into the flow of things. It's no different. You know?
Absolutely.
If you're, it's like VAR. If you're doing VAR role all the time, you become really good. And that's why with the assistant referees, we had a group of world-class assistant referees. Now I look at their role and I think, what are you doing? Because I know he's offside, you know he's offside, but you're not raising the flag. And we're all waiting for that crash that comes between the goalkeeper and the forward. Ain't really happened too often, but it's a worry.
We've had a couple. And there've been some pretty serious ones as well from that. And it may have only happened twice, but that's two times too many.
Yeah, and they were obvious. I think on each occasion they weren't even tight offside calls.
The flags are so late to go.
Keith, just on the player engagement, assistant referee.
Oh God! Just on the player engagement, actually, going a little bit back to our decision as well. Callum Wilson does a podcast. I don't know if you listen to that; it's quite funny. But him and Mikel Antonio were talking, both current professional footballers. And it was quite interesting. Me and Mark were talking about this before we come on air. So Wilson said he was robbed of a goal because of the handball, and he was explaining it, and he mentioned about the sleeve length and everything else. And then Mikel Antonio had to try to correct him, and the two of them were almost lost completely as to how the rule worked, because it hit Ivan Toney's arm first, then it hit Wilson. And Wilson was saying, "Why is it not a penalty?" And Antonio said, "No. If it hits him and goes to you, but hits you and you score, you're in the wrong." And it just, I mean, all these referees. I mean, obviously, back in your time, was there more player engagement? Did you speak to the captains of the club? Did you bring in the top players? And I don't feel that's happening now. Did you think that's the case?
Let me tell you, and I think hopefully it is, but I couldn't guarantee that it is. When I became boss of the PGMOL, I said that I wanted to try and create a conduit between the referee and each team.
Yeah. And
to achieve that, I wanted, when the team sheets come in 1 hour before kickoff, I wanted the captains of both teams to come in to the dressing room. And this actually happened. We had to say to the captains, by the way, you've no real authority in the laws of the game other than to determine which way you're going to kick. But I'm going to give you a bit because I'm going to have a word. And I think that is part and parcel of some of the troubles. I mean, they used to come in, and I've been there with different referees. I can remember standing as the observer. Mark Alls was the referee. The player came in and he went, "Oh my God, I hope you have a better match than you did last time I refereed you." And he got in first. And they go, "Well, I looked at the team sheet. You're the worst referee on the list." That was the opening gambit of the conversation. But in reality, they just got on with each other on the field of play because they respected each other. When we look at that incident involving the assistant referee at the weekend, it could have all been avoided if the assistant referee had just. I know Robertson's a pain in the backside, but at the end of the day, players are like that. I mean, I was in the era refereeing people like Gascoigne. And let me give you an example of the things that I used to do. If Gascoigne was on the subs bench, like a rubber band, he was getting wound up because all he wanted to do was play football. And like you could see it building as you run past. You knew full well that when the board went up, I'd go across. The referees were then encouraged to go across and say, "Blimey hell, Paul, how's your manager got you in the box? The best player in your squad, and you're sat there. He must be giving you a rest, mate. Now listen, enjoy the game. I'm really looking forward to you." that sort of introduction took some of the heat out, and he didn't go and clatter somebody. And I think it's just common sense, really. You know, there were some you couldn't talk to. You couldn't talk to Paul Bracewell. Bracewell wasn't a good communicator. If you spoke to Peter Reid when he was at Everton, he was in your ear all the time. Rattle, 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 rattle. But he kept you on your toes, and you kept him on your toes. You know, I tell a story of refereeing at Old Trafford, and Gordon McQueen and Joe Jordan had just been sold to Old Trafford from Leeds United.
Wow.
Joe Jordan, the ball comes to him and he catches it in his hands. By that, he's got his hands down, but he's actually down below and controls the ball in between his two arms. I've blown. The expletives are huge and long, and he's heading for me. And I put my hand out and said, "Stop there. There's obviously a problem." And he goes, "Yes, there is," and whatever. And I've gone, "If you go on like that, you're banned from Stringfellas nightclub." And he's looked at me as though I'm off a planet. He's gone, "What?" I go, "My brother's a director of Stringfellas nightclub, mate. Do you understand?" And he went, "You're not Johnny Hackett's brother, are you?" And I go, "I am. And you'll be banned if you're not careful." And there's him and McQueen then having a chat, because McQueen knew, Gordon McQueen as captain knew. But those are the sort of things that go off on the field of play that are conducive to, I think, good refereeing. And you can then get in the play. I'll tell you one more final story, in that I was refereeing at Anfield. It was only my second game at Anfield. And I awarded a free kick against Kenny Dalglish, and Emily News came running up to me and was spitting feathers. And I've gone, "Your caution, what's your name?" Because that's how we had to do it first before we got the yellow card out. He goes, "Yeah, what?" I go, "What's your name?" And he goes, "You know me so-and-so name. I'm the England captain." And I go, "Oh, right. Yeah, HEML, and he's ING." And I'm saying it as I'm saying it to you. And he goes, "You what?" "I'm Emily News." I said, "That's all I wanted, your name. I've got it. Now behave." And I never had a peep at her, Emily. And we went to games together when he lived around Sheffield before he sadly passed away. But I think that, look, I think it's a craft and it's an art, and it's different. There's no question that pressure's on players, pressure's on referees, but we're human and we've got to interact. And, you know, I now see, and I keep mentioning Michael Oliver because he's your patch and you know him, but you now see Michael Oliver smiling. He didn't smile when he was a young lad because it was a big pressure environment. But now he knows he's a good referee. He's confident. He's not arrogant. And he communicates really well. And, of course, the one thing that the assistant referee didn't have at the weekend was composure, and he does. Oliver has a lot of composure and calmness in his referee, which is good because it keeps the temperature low in games that are even high profile.
And the back of sort of that, in terms of, I mean, you mentioned the word before, which is the ultimate one, which is respect, and the build of respect between referees and players. I think that, well, certainly from an outside perspective, you see an absolute lack of that, particularly over recent weeks. Is it a frustration in terms of the poor quality refereeing that we've got at the moment? Do you think that's why we've started to see a few more incidents of those extreme interactions between players and referees? That Mitrovic for being one, Fernandez was another who still think completely got away with one there. And then obviously the incident with Robertson at the week. Do you think that's a kind of a culmination of the decline of the standard referees and then that lack of respect, the lack of communication between them?
I think that, you know, we thinking about this, and it is a serious matter. What happens at the very highest level cascades down to grassroots level, and it makes grassroots refereeing very, very difficult. I think that, you expect respect. If we look at players now, they're making the game very difficult for referees. They're very good at diving. And believe me, there are times when I've looked at the video a couple of times to determine if it's a dive or it's not a dive. We see them feigning injury. It's amazing, isn't it, now? I've watched Arsenal over recent weeks. I'm not just calling Arsenal out, but the reality is they now have water breaks. They've brought them into the game because what happens is somebody goes down with an head injury, and you look around and think, well, how did that happen? And so these are the tactics you've got. You will find in that area of being in the top 4 or 5 of the Premier League, what happens is when teams start coming to St James's, they'll want to try and have a situation where they play the least amount of actual playing time. They'll find all ways of slowing things down because that reduces the opportunity for Newcastle United to score. And those are tactics that probably Newcastle do when they go to Man City and Man United. And those, if you're not aware as a referee that those things are taking part, then you should be. Good referees are proactive referees. Good referees are the ones that run alongside the captain and say, look, we've had enough tea breaks now. I'm going to ignore the next one. And by the way, if he's going to feign injury, he's going to go off after treatment, and I'm not going to watch him or see him for a bit because I'm going to leave him standing on the touchline. These are the types of conversations you have during the course of the match with the skipper because you're applying a degree of pressure. And I think that one of the things that's happened is that we've heard the talk about the lighter touch, referees creating a lighter touch. And what that has done for me is it's created a degree of inconsistency. The lighter touch is a top quality referee who on a foul can apply a good advantage. If a player is being held in the penalty area, he's being held. Why do referees go in and say to the forward and defender, look guys, I don't want this happening at corner kicks, and then it happens and they do nothing. I don't understand why referees do that. That's not preventative refereeing. Preventative refereeing is you're going once and you say, look, cut it out, and then the next time you either give a penalty kick or a free kick. And by heck, it sorts it. But I think that what we've got is we've got an inconsistency of refereeing at the moment in terms of across the group. We've got kids who are learning the game and not getting enough appointments, and we've got some who perhaps are at the end of their career and need to be doing other work. They're not good enough.
This is a great question from Lee. Lee's one of our podcast members.
Yeah.
And it's about that infamous ghost goal. Again, it was at the Watford game where it went out for a goal kick. Just while we've got you on, Keith, we'll be remiss not to ask you what was your take on that one? I mean, you must have lost your mind with that one, surely.
Well, I mean, I was the boss, and I think I was culpable, really, because here was a young kid. There was a choice between him coming onto the list and Michael Oliver.
Right.
And I put forward Michael Oliver. And the board decided to take Atwell and said, look, Michael's going to come on next season. But I was on my way out of towards retirement and doing other work for the Premier League. I was at Anfield and a journalist says, oh, you've got a problem at Watford. Atwell's given a goal, and I'm telling you, yeah, have a look. And I had a look. I couldn't believe it. So I rang the assessor who was at the match, and I said, what's gone off? And he told me. And Atwell was convinced that he hadn't gone in the back of the net. He was convinced. But the assistant referee, who was a very senior assistant referee, convinced him that he'd had. And he went with the assistant referee. That evening, I phoned Michael and I phoned Stuart Atwell and said, right, get your bags packed. I've booked you a ticket on a plane. You're going to Spain for a week. I got him out of the way. And his mother rang the following morning and said, Mr. Hackett, there's all these cars and vans parked outside my house, and there's all these journalists wanting to know where our Stuart is. And I said, give him a cup of tea and tell him he's gone to Spain. I've sent him to Spain. But yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, this is why I'm for VAR, goal line technology. When I look back, we had to look at a small piece of cloth on the end of a stick to determine whether the guy was flagging or not. That's why I brought in communication kits. We had a problem with those in the first few months. I was at Chelsea and suddenly the referee's running and he stops and puts his finger to his ear and he's looking as though a plane's landed on the pitch. He's forgotten about the game. And at half time I go in and say, hey, what's the problem? And he goes, I'm not using the communication kit in the second half. And I go, why? He said, well, I'm running down the field and I get, could I have a cab from Kensington High Street to like Oxford Circus? He said, and I've got that on the communication kit. So on the Tuesday, they all went back and we had them all calibrated to make certain that didn't happen. But in reality, referees will always make errors.
Yeah.
Don't fudge it. It's a little bit like Howard's Howard Webb is a great man manager and he was an outstanding referee. He's just got to be given time to change what has been a lengthy period of rule under Mike Riley. And he's got a problem. Let's face it, he's got to sort out the referees and get them thinking on his wavelength. I think he's got to get them fitter, more mobile. Yeah. And he's got to appoint the best ones to the games.
Just on that point, Keith, it's been brilliant listening to you talk, and you're clearly still very, very involved and very clued up on everything that's going on. Would Howard Webb or has anybody potentially reached out to you to ask you to maybe come in and consult and maybe help them improve? Or is that just something you don't think would happen?
I do that overseas.
Right.
I get asked to do that. Look, they'd be frightened to death of me, and I don't know why. Because ultimately, my aim always is to have the very best referees and have the very world-class referees. English world-class referees is what I achieved. I left them with 10. I left them with some really cracking referees that had in different personalities. Some were dealt with, but they were on. I've mentioned Jeff Winter. Jeff Winter was a cracking referee with a great personality.
Proper character, wasn't he? Yeah, he was.
And I'll tell you, at the end of it all, character or whatever, was an outstanding referee.
Yeah.
And I'd give him a match. I didn't have any problems with Jeff. He'd just go out and deliver. I never had the problems that we're seeing now with the referees. If I had, they knew what the consequences were. But I knew that they were traveling 12,500 meters on average. They were doing 50 sprints a game. And they were seeing things because they were fit and committed. And they went out and did the training in the week, all under a polar heart monitor. So it was measured, downloaded. With one or two, we had to change the diets. And we had a nutritionist to do that. I'm still passionate because I want English refereeing to succeed. Because we have the best league in the world. Make no mistake, everybody wants to copy the Premier League. But at the moment, I get former colleagues who are now in charge of referees overseas saying to me, what is happening to English refereeing? And I say to myself, where is the next Clattenburg? I had Oliver in the wings. I knew he was going to be the next Clattenburg, but where is the next Clattenburg? Is he operating at championship level? Well, I talked to some of my mates who are Unitedite and Wednesdayites in the Championship and League One, and they go, "Oh, you want to see what we've had this week?" I'm president of a local club at non-league level, and I see some really good referees, and I think to myself, why are they not being at middle 20s? Why are they refereeing at our level? Why aren't they given a chance to come through? And then the other thing is, with all the kids that get offloaded at the academies, why aren't we encouraging some of those to become referees? You know,
Great show. Yeah.
And I think that we had Steve Harper, Newcastle United's goalkeeper, qualified referee, refereeing in local parks, wasn't he, at the weekend?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
But then Sunday, I said to him, well, when he finishes, I didn't say to him, but I said to the FA, when he finishes his career, he can like bounce straight in.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's got to referee in the park, Mr. Hackett. You know, he's got to do what other referees do. You had 12 years apprenticeship, and you go, but he's a professional player. You know, he's got attributes that accelerate him and should balance against the years that you need to spend in the park.
And you can see things potentially the referees won't be aware of, these little tricks that the players maybe pull. He's maybe got a little bit of that as well, hasn't he?
They're Dick Turpin, aren't they? I mean, effectively, what they are is they're Dick Turpin, and all of a sudden they know the ins and outs, and they know the ins and outs of players. It took me 2-3 years to understand that. You know, when you suddenly were going to drop a ball between two players, you threw it in the air, and they go, "What are you about?" I said, "Well, I don't want either of you injured. I've come to referee you two." But I think it is, you know. I see some referees and they don't look as though they're enjoying it anymore, do they? You know, you look and it is, you know, look, I had 3 cameras, but towards the end there were more cameras when I was a Premier League referee. There's 22 cameras on these guys, a lot of social media. They're in the mind's eye, but they're earning over 100,000 a year. Yeah. And that's the realism of it. You know, when I look back and things have changed, I don't bear any grudge, because I once had a conversation between Nat Lofthouse and Tom Finney, Sir Tom Finney, over a lunch. It was at Burnham Park. It was really terrific. There was no one else there, just me and Neil Midgley, a famous referee. And I said, you know, have you, you know, they're now earning tens of thousands of pounds. And he went, yeah, I wouldn't have it any different. We got our £7, and occasionally we got the odd £3, didn't, because we'd won, and like the chairman's dug in his pocket and said, "Thanks, boys," and we got a little bit of a bonus. And you know, I mean, I talk about my FA Cup final. I got £35 for it. The first thing they do is they come in the dressing room before you go out in Wembley, full house, beamed around the world, and they'd say to you, "Right, Mr. Hackett, you've got a choice to make: £35 match fee or the gold medal." I mean, like, and you look and you go, "Yeah, you're wearing a blazer, mate. I understand you're off a planet. Don't ask me about the money. I'm here to enjoy myself." And we didn't do it for the money and I don't think referees do now. I think it's a living, but I think you want to be the best. And you know, you didn't see Michael Oliver. He was out. He had a quarter-final this week in the European Cup. That's how good a referee he is. And in a way, I feel sorry for him, because his reputation's been tarnished, isn't it? He's grouped in. And this is why I spent a bit of time talking about Michael and Anthony Taylor and others, is because I honestly don't think there's some thought going into refereeing. I worry about it. I mean, I was phoned by a local newspaper here today, and we've got Sheffield United going for promotion. Ipswich are going for, or is it Norwich? That part, Ipswich, I think, are going for promotion at the same time. And they put a Sheffield referee on that game at Ipswich, and they're all up in arms. You know, in my day, I refereed Leeds United twice because I was Sheffield based. Too close, they used to say. And I think that now what you've got is you know, I'm not questioning the integrity, but you know, you've got Anthony Taylor, who lives in Altrincham, referees the Manchester clubs. Yeah. You know, and so those things have changed. They don't change for the better. I don't know.
On the subject of change, and we'll move slightly away from maybe the referees themselves, and something that probably doesn't help them an awful lot is the laws. And obviously, we've talked about the T-shirt line and things with handball and things. Are there any of the laws of the game now that you would change, or what changes would you make to current setups, whether that be offside and maybe the use of VAR or handball? Any other laws that you would maybe tweak or look to change?
Yeah, I'd change the handball law straight away. I've not got it, but 1938 laws of the game. Now, I'm not a nerd. I've got to tell you, I'm not a nerd. 1938, right? And I don't know if I can find it, but right. A player shall be penalised if he intentionally handles the ball, i.e. carries it, strikes it, or propels it with his hand or arm.
Simple.
This doesn't,
Simple.
What have we got? He makes the body bigger. It's not the T-shirt line. It's the underside of the armpit. Because
or non-intent, it's nonsense. Yeah.
They sit. What we've got is, I've got to be careful here what I say, but I'm not. I think we've got too many players' influence in how the laws are being shaped without the knowledge of how they're applied. You know that at 30 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour speed limit, you're unlikely to get done.
Yeah.
31, 32, you're still a bit grey. And the copper might say to you, hey, Sponny lad, slow down. 33, you're done. 10%.
Yeah.
And I think that approach of a degree of flexibility, which is it intentional? Did he propel the ball? Is what we want. If you look, and I've got into the science of body mechanics. If you are going for a jump, you raise your hands and arms to elevate yourself, right? But interestingly, if you go above the horizontal, you're now inefficient. You're coming down. You're not going up for elevation. What does that tell you? He's got his arm there for a reason. Bang.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And
Shearer was great at that, wasn't he?
But Malcolm McDonald was as well. Yeah. So I think that those are the areas where what we've got is Shearer would give one and get one back. That would
definitely. Yeah, Adams would give Shearer 1 10 minutes later, wouldn't he? Generally,
And Beardsley would. Peter Beardsley would ride 3 or 4 tackles. I refereed him in the States as well as at Newcastle, and Peter dodged those tackles often. And you think, God, he's flying in on him, but he'd still come out smiling. There'd be no animosity of wanting to go back. In a way, it's part of the game. But what we've got, and kids copy, is we've got a lot of actors, haven't we? There's no water, but they dive, and they get hit in the chest and hold the face as though they've been, it's the dark arts of the game that you and I smile about because we know that is daft. But when it's against our team or when it's the opposition, we go mad. So ultimately, what the referee's got to do in the middle is get the balance to say, right, how can he cut it out?
Yeah, I think I was just going to say in terms of the dark arts and the feign and injury and things, one of the things we got, and particularly a little bit more during the COVID sort of lockouts, was the shrieking on the pitch from players when they get tackled. It's horrendous.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's all sorts of things that go off on a field of play, and sometimes I think it's gamesmanship at its worst, and we don't want to see it because ultimately the Premier League are cheating you two. You pay for a season ticket, and you pay to watch 90 minutes of football, and you're lucky if you're getting 55 minutes of actual playing time. And it's those areas where the Premier League and the FA and the lawmakers have got to get their act together. They've got to say, look, how can we encourage players? How can we encourage teams to actually give more in the game itself than 55 minutes of actual playing time, which is the average of a Premier League game currently?
Yeah, just on the on some of the pressures and the rule changes there, Keith, as well. Just something that popped in my mind. I think now more than ever, we've got so many pundits, so much, vocal criticism of the game. Do you think that maybe sometimes it's pundit pressure and pressure from the media that maybe makes the PGMOL make decisions on rules and overcomplicate rules because of how much people have pulled up and dissected the problems? Do you think there's an element of that as well?
I mean, the PGMOL have no say in the laws of the game. The laws of the game are penned by the International Football Association Board, of which England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales have a vote. I mean, Germany and Spain and other countries don't. So, FIFA have 4 votes and they have to have a majority for anything to be passed. I think that there are, if we look at the offside law and how we've moved the offside law to become something that's mathematical rather than practical, that's why you say, right, go semi-automated and take the match officials out of it. Let's use artificial intelligence, and then we all agree with it. We don't have to rely on the guy on the line. We're dispensing with some of his quality. I think the aspects are that I think it's easy to sit around a table and say, it's the underside of the shirt, it's the underside of the armpit that determines where the arm is for offside, for handball. That's conceived around a table. It's not conceived in a game of football, and I think that we just need to get a degree of practicality in it, because it makes life difficult for referees at the top level, but it also makes life difficult for referees at grassroots level. No question. If we saw at the weekend, the assistant referee appear to elbow the Liverpool player, you've got to look at that scenario in detail. You've got to try and say what was said, how it was said, and it's the FA that have to interrogate that and examine and look very closely at all the footage that's available to determine, did the assistant referee intentionally elbow the player, or did he in fact try to shrug him off? And they have that decision to make. But I put in my 2 pence, because once that is finished with the FA, the PGMOL, who are his employer, have now then got a referee or an assistant referee who's found guilty of assaulting a player. And they then, on employment law, have to determine what action that they take. Do they actually say sufficient punishment by the Football Association, if he's found guilty, by the way, or is it gross misconduct and could he lose his job? So these are not simple, he's done it or he hasn't done it. What you've then got to look at is, what are the consequences and how could it be avoided? And I think then what you do is what I used to do. Pre-season, I'd get the managers in. They had to attend, by the way. And I used to have three meetings, and the manager had to attend had to attend one of them. And in those meetings, those sort of things would be discussed. Acts of simulation, how can we avoid it? How are we going to detect it? How are we going to apply the laws of the game? And I think this art of communication, then I encourage referees to go in to clubs and referee a pre-season friendly under those laws, very carefully, rigidly enforced, so the players understood what the changes were going to be. One of those areas was, of course, when we were going through the introduction and changes to the denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity. and how we needed to look at the criteria, players understanding what that criteria is, to reduce the complexity of it and make everybody understand what the lawmakers want to do.
So I think you touched on a really valid point, and it's a little bit of a segue into the sort of the next question that we had, and it comes on the back of the respect thing, and it goes down to grassroots. And I think to coin a phrase in the chat here is put in with regards to the simulation and things that go on, and the kids will then go on and copy this at grassroots level. And we hear so much about referees walking away from the game at grassroots level because of the levels of abuse that they get from players, from parents and fans and things at that level. Do you think that the lack, and we'll come back to that word respect, the lack of respect at the top of the game translates down to the grassroots level? And how do we, I think, go from players setting a bad example and that lack of respect there? How do we change that? How do we begin changing that?
Well, I think referees have the biggest part to play in it, and that is you apply the laws of the game. I mean, at this moment in time, the Football Association have fined Premier League clubs in total over £1 million this season for players surrounding the referee or having a bit of a go at each other, under the banner of failing to control their players. The club gets charged and then a fine is applied. There's the famous referee in the Northeast, Peter Willis, who was a copper by profession. I can remember he was faced with a group of players wanting to argue against one of his decisions. And he went, bang, 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 4 yellow cards. He didn't get it in the rest of the game, and he didn't get it for the rest of his career because they said, the managers say, no, it's Peter Willis here. Don't go anywhere near him. Don't argue with him because he'll give you a yellow card. I think we're failing to control players in the truest sense. I think we're allowing them to get away with a murder. They go down the touchline. Rarely do you see a throw taken from the right position, and I'm not to an inch. We see lots of one-handed throws. The guy who throws it into the penalty area is usually throwing it with one hand ahead of the other. And as a referee, you can detect that. The messing around, the 9.15, look how we've seen how when the spray can came in, it was used every match and about a dozen times, and they started running out of paint. And now few times it's used now. If you think of your games, how often do you see it used? Probably once in a game. Yeah. The players are still not going 10 yards. So and then you've got players disputing. And I don't think we use the captains as well as we should do. I think, I was never a referee who said the next time you do that, you're going to get a yellow card. I used to say, right, I want an improvement. But I'd run along the captain who I'd already chatted to and say, look, your number 4 is getting a bit noisy. He's trying to tell me how to referee.
You don't see as much of that anymore. I mean, we've got a very good captain in Kieran Trippier who is always pushing our players back, and he's quite an experienced pro, isn't he? But you don't see a lot of that in other teams. Players run roughshod, and the captain often disappears, or he's the one who's in the referee's face. I've heard several conversations this week. The first one is, should players not be allowed to be within a couple of meters of the referee? I think that's a good idea, but it's not practicable. Should we use the captain as the conduit? Answer yes. Let us give the authority to the referee, to the captain, to be the one where you say, you guys stand back there, captain, come and I'll have a chat. One of the difficulties of that is when the team makes the captain, the goalkeeper, the captain. Yeah.
That then becomes less operable in that scenario. But I think anything that can reduce conflict, because life is difficult for grassroots referees. I had 12 years at the grassroots level, and throughout my career, just like George Courtney and others, we refereed. So we might have an international match on a midweek, and we refereed 2 pub teams on a Saturday. I did that throughout my career because we got a great deal and derived a great deal of enjoyment out of that. And I've been to 100 countries refereeing or coaching referees. If you said in 1960, when I first took up the whistle, that's what you would achieve, absolutely not. I didn't even think I'd get a cup final. It was hard work, and you just applied yourself, and you got a great deal of enjoyment out of it. And young referees will, but the parents want too much out of them. I mean, in certain regions now, I think probably in North Riding they wear a purple referee shirt which says they're 18 or under. We've just in Sheffield now with County FA, we put a yellow badge armband on the referee to say he's 18 or under, just to try to help the referee through those informative years when you stand out there in the middle and you go and almost forget to blow the whistle because you're the guy in charge. It's a daunting task, but it's a really enjoyable one.
Yeah, just I suppose one last one from us, Keith, is talking about a lot about players and everything else. Do you feel the managers have an ultimate responsibility here to set the example for their players? You often see him as managers like Jurgen Klopp, for example, who always kind of has a go at the referee in press conferences and things like that. Do you often feel the managers are setting a really bad example here? I mean, we personally feel Eddie Howe is quite always comes across quite respectful when he's talking about officials. And he'll have his moments, I'm sure, like every other manager. But do you feel like the managers are negating their responsibility here, neglecting their responsibility to set that tone for their players, to say, listen, you need to go and respect that referee rather than just letting them run roughshod?
I can remember an era when they didn't have a technical area. I mean, I look at a technical area now, they must have 2 coaches and another aeroplane. There's that many of them. And the fourth official's got a job to do. He's there to actually help the referee and look at the match. And half the time he's cutting out the squabbles. It's a nonsense, isn't it? It's become the sideshow that we don't want to see. You can name almost every manager that runs down the touchlines, not in the technical area, wants his 2 penneth. Look at me, I'm active. Probably because they think if he's not a very good manager. You see the Arsenal manager this year. I mean, like he's gone completely over the top sometimes. I'm thinking, you're not a player, you're a manager. You've got to set an example, I think. But ultimately, there's passion in the game and a will to win. All referees have got to do is try and control it and not ignore it. And I feel that there are some times we've let the cat out of the bag to some degree, and trying to get it back in is difficult. I think, we have these clampdowns, don't we? And they last about 6 weeks. I just think that it is a difficult environment. The manager's always on the risk of getting fired. Therefore, the pressure's on him. Fans want him to be like pictorial in his views, and I'm sure the Liverpool fans love it when Klopp runs down the wing, and I think, stupid old guy, let the players do the running. You're the guy that's doing the manager. I mean, my sales manager knew every customer by name, but he never met them, and he always was in his office. He never met anybody. He had his minions like me running around all over the bloody country, 12 hours a day, meeting customers. So I think at the end of the day, let the players play. You do your job tactically. But look at them now. I mean, like, I wonder when there's going to... I mean, I can remember the era when people were saying, Clough and Peter Taylor, why does it need 2? And one sub. and you look at it now and like, I mean, they celebrate a goal and they're all on the pitch. And I'm thinking, what's that about? And in my day, the fans used to clap the players. We didn't have the players clapping the spectators. I mean, there are all those changes that have come in the game. I mean, like, we've lost, lads. We better clap everybody that's travelled. And you're probably stood there and thinking, you bloody lost. You picked the wrong team. I mean, look, it's football, isn't it? I mean, we're never going to take that. We're all passionate about it. I mean, I mean, I watch grassroots football now. I watch a lot of grassroots football. I thoroughly enjoy it because I get 90 minutes passion. And when they dive, they're usually about half an hour after the event. It's that obvious. But you've got young referees who, at times, we've been getting at our club, we've been getting up to 500 supporters who are pretty vociferous. But at the end of the day, they're in touching distance of the players, and they'll appreciate a good performance by the referee, and they'll say it. So there's that balance, But you think about it, I mean, I've had the pleasure at St James's Park. I've refereed there on times many, and these are iconic stadiums. You don't need the crowd to tell you how to referee, because I'm telling you, the adrenaline's running like crazy, and you just want to referee as best as you possibly can. And people like Atwell, I hope anyway, because when I made a mistake, I knew I'd made a mistake, and the drive home was not a good one.
No,
believe me, because I'm thinking, how could I avoid that? And because I suffered pain-wise in my own sort of pre-match or post-match review, I avoided then making that error the next time round. It's a pride thing, isn't it?
it is. You've got to take pride in your work. But Keith, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on, mate. We could listen to you for hours, but we don't want to take up any more of your time, mate. But it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for everybody who's smashed a comment in there. We could have probably done with a mediator, I think, Mark. We've had that many comments and we've struggled to pull them up.
Exactly.
Loads of love for Keith in the comments. And as I said at the start, this is the kind of thing you guys like. Please drop us a subscribe. We'd love you to come and join us. We're closing in on 3,000 subs. We're just over the 2,800 mark. So loads of room for you guys here, and hopefully more fantastic guests in the episodes to come, just like Keith. So this is Chris and Mark signing off for an Evermore podcast. Let's keep supporting that team of United. Thanks again for your time, Keith.
Thank you
very much, Keith.
Let's do it again.
Cheers now.
Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Bye bye.